Hello and welcome to the Information Security Summit podcast. I'm Robert Netkin, and we are at the Information Security Summit 2025 here in Westlake, Ohio. And these podcasts are being recorded and posted on YouTube. And we're really excited at this conference. There are a lot of great security professionals as well as sponsors of the Information Security Summit. And I'm actually here with one of those sponsors today. I am here talking with Tony Bailey. Tony is with Contrast Security. And Tony, welcome to the ISS.
Yep.
I understand you're a sponsor. Thank you for sponsoring the Information Security Summit.
Welcome.
And as I'm reading through the notes they handed me, because otherwise I have no idea what to talk about if I don't have stuff handed to me. It says, rethinking cyber security for covert application risks. Covert application risk. It sounds like something out of a movie title or something
Spy
like
book.
that. Yes. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so when we talk about covert application security, one of the areas that we come across is this notion of applications and vulnerabilities in applications are a rising area of concern. We see various reports, industry reports that talk about application vulnerabilities resulting in data breaches, and you must pay attention to your applications and vulnerabilities. And for a lot of organizations, that's easier said than done, particularly in the world of AI, where application development, if you could argue, is in a way either accelerating or making more use of AI in application development.
Oh, we're stepping on the gas pedal with AI.
Yes.
We really are. I mean, in Security Friends, the session we had this morning, I was reading a story talking about vulnerabilities being introduced at an increased rate, along with that increased pace of productivity of AI.
Yes.
In a security news story.
Yes.
And is that the type of thing that your organization is dealing with and providing as a service to your customers?
Yeah, most definitely. So with our customers, what they tell us is that this notion of either increasing velocity of application development as a result of AI, or
increasing velocity. I mean, is that the boss coming and saying, "Hurry up, get it done, damn it"? Is that what you mean by increasing velocity of application
potentially,
development?
yeah. And then what do developers do? They may say, you know what, I may leverage AI as an assistant in my code development.
Because the developer is working under the "hurry up and get it done, damn it" mantra.
Yes.
From the management to whom they report.
Yes. And whether that results in an increased number of vulnerabilities in applications, that can be open to debate, to find hard data. But definitely, as I said earlier, industry reports refer to the notion of application vulnerabilities are certainly one of the top areas of concern when it comes to data breaches.
Well, it seems logical at a surface level. I mean, if you're a developer and you're using these AIs as a form of a power tool, instead of sawing the wood by hand, you're now using this circular saw and you're buzzing through the wood much more fast, much more quickly. Likewise, analogous to that, you're using these AI tools and you're describing what you want the code to do, and all of a sudden you magically get this block of code that does what you described, and you just drop this little building block into your application. Not having had the time to tinker with it and tweak it and see if this LLM created this amalgam of a code block that works, but works with unintended consequences. So yes, you're being more productive, but you're just developing vulnerabilities at a faster pace that you would have developed at the slower pace anyway.
Yes,
so
indeed.
it sounds to me that it's reasonable to assume that if you're going to have vulnerabilities at a standard pace of development previous to AI, that you would have the same measure of vulnerabilities at the accelerated pace of AI. It doesn't remove the vulnerability paradigm. And then you still are dealing with the "hurry up and get it done, damn it" mantra that the boss is saying, "Hurry up, get it done, damn it," because the marketing department wants this last week.
Yeah.
And the last thing on their mind is cybersecurity. Of course. I mean, what else has changed?
And then the question arises, and actually adding on to that point, you could argue for developers, they may not be security experts.
No.
Their sort of goal is to...
I say that sarcastically, but that's not their charge historically.
Indeed.
Secure development is not been... They've been under the mantra, which I satirize, but it's an accurate description, I think, in many development organizations, the hurry up and get it done, damn it mantra, where marketing is always in opposition to application security. They're at loggerheads.
Yeah.
They have different objectives. It's like, oh, those darn security nerds are holding us back. It's like, and they trivialize what we in the security world consider important, which is making sure the application doesn't introduce undesired risk. So tell us, how does contrast security help the client?
Yeah, and that's a very good segue from talking about the notion of increased application development. So you have to answer the question then is, okay, so how do we ensure that when our applications are in development, that we focus on exploitable vulnerabilities? How do we uncover exploitable vulnerabilities? How do we make sure that we're focused on the things that need our most attention? That's the first part, in development. Then the second part is, okay, now my application is in the wild, it's running in production, and the last thing I want is for a data breach to occur, and that data breach occurs due to an exploit on my application. And so that's where Contrast and other companies are playing this notion of, oh yikes, we've got to try and figure out a way to cut through the clutter of, say, existing testing tools, which they do a certain job of passing a checklist for your application.
We're talking about like the CVE type scans, or the top 10 vulnerabilities.
That's exactly
the routine check the list scan.
Yeah.
So you want to go beyond the check the list scan.
Absolutely. So our thought is, hey, what about this? What about runtime application security? Let's look at the application actually running live in production with real user data, real user inputs, and it puts a more real face on what the application is doing in reality. And then with runtime application security, you can peel back and go, oh yikes, of the 100 vulnerabilities we found, 3 of them are actually exploitable. And that's kind of where Contrast is playing, helping application security teams pay attention to the things that matter, and then they can pass on that information to developers. And there are some nuances as well to runtime application security, which is, don't just tell me there's a problem with my application. Don't just tell me, well, it's vulnerable. I'd like to know, what is the actual line of code that's problematical? And again, that's an area that Contrast Security is playing very well in, is it's actually telling you the exploitable line of code, so you can then put in a ticket back to the developer, who again, may or may not be a security expert. They may say, okay, you've told me there's a vulnerability, can you tell me just a little bit more?
So what kind of, are you observing trends in the work that you're doing with your clients? Are you observing that older vulnerabilities are being discovered more, or there are more vulnerabilities in a particular development paradigm, whether it be PHP or Java or Node.js or whatever? Are you seeing patterns that may be greater than others, where more attention is required in your experience?
Yeah, so certainly what we see with our customers, there's certain exploits and certain vectors, things that are referred to as things like SQL injection is one.
Oh, wait a minute. I thought we got rid of SQL injection. You mean it still happens? Sarcasm added.
Yes, so attackers, if they're not sophisticated, they're certainly relentless. And so they'll try every trick in the book.
I mean, Johnny Drop Tables, man, he's been going to school everywhere,
And then there's others, such as unsafe deserialization. If you're familiar with that notion where an application has to open up a packet of information and it's not checking first, what I'm about to unpack, is it safe? So unsafe deserialization. I've actually referred to it as being insecure deserialization, but insecure is almost like, oh yikes, is your application afraid of something? But unsafe deserialization is probably more accurate term. So yeah, we are seeing things, that there are common threads within some applications in terms of top exploits that our customers are coming across.
Do you notice patterns in terms of developers, seasoned developers versus newbies, in terms of application vulnerabilities. And is there any generalized observation that you've made or come across or just noticed?
Not at this point in time, but again, vulnerabilities, are not a static thing, and there's if you pay attention to things like top 10 lists, throughout the years, those things shuffle around. What was down here?
It's a dynamic landscape.
Very much so, yeah. And piling on to this notion of runtime application security, a lot of organizations, particularly our customers, have invested in that notion, and it does require somewhat of a culture shift, because you're asking developers, when it comes to runtime application security, there are some things you have to do to make runtime application security work.
Well, in runtime, by runtime, are we thinking about the fact that there's just more emphasis on interpreted vehicles for application delivery? I mean, Java is an interpreted language, and
Yes.
so on. PHP, I mean, these things are not really compiled in terms of the old traditional languages, and I've heard security pros who obviously are in the bits and bytes more so than I am, not a developer, are saying in their discussions and other podcasts that I've listened to, that interpreted languages and anything that's interpreted being developed as a language and delivered as a language platform is by definition more vulnerable. And is that exactly what you mean when you say runtime?
So what I mean by runtime is this idea of looking really deep into the application as it executes. And so you imagine, let's say you're running a Java application in a JVM. So you've got line by line execution. What runtime is doing is it's applying this notion of, I'll call it agents or sensors.
This sounds like an old style debugger.
That's actually an interesting analogy. You could kind of look at it that way, which is, as the application is running, runtime application security is leveraging these sensors, and it may be looking at things like HTTP traffic. It may be looking at things like data flows, and at some point in time, they go, "Oh, yikes! We're at this line of code where an attacker could apply a SQL injection," and so that's when I say pinpointing the actual line of code that has a vulnerability is really, really key, particularly in this world of elevated speed of development. Again, don't just tell me my thing's vulnerable. Give me the specifics. Give me the context. For example, show me what was a user input, and SQL injection is a good example where you've got some funky characters you put into a web form and click on send, and it goes to the SQL server, and the SQL server goes, "Oh, yikes, look at this. It was first name Tony, last name Bailey with some weird characters that sends me to a malware URL. Sure, I'll execute that."
A SQL injection that does an HTTP pivot.
Yes.
In the application, or perhaps at a higher level, meaning the lower level where it's supposed to run totally ignores it, but the higher level in the web browser executes it.
Right.
Am I following this correctly?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And exhibited by putting some, you may see it, some strange characters into the field, and essentially the server doesn't know what to do with it, and so it just goes again and go, "Oh, fine, I'll go execute this thing."
I was reading an article about right to left versus left to right languages and the Unicode URLs that are being used in phishing. Is that the type of thing that you're observing in your work as well?
So, when it comes to things like phishing attacks, typically maybe happening more at the endpoint, than within an application. So we're definitely focused more on the application side, running in an environment like a JVM or a Python environment or
but
a
it
.NET.
ultimately bubbles up into a web browser.
Yes.
That is the application delivery platform we have in the modern world. We're not dealing with telnet screens.
Right.
We're not dealing anymore with the old client-server environment with a fat Windows application on a desktop.
Mm-hmm.
We're now dealing with something that's an HTML 5 on steroids, enhanced, Web 3.0 or whatever type application being delivered on a web browser of any number of different web browser platforms. And that is the modern application paradigm we live in.
Yeah.
And that is, by its own definition, incredibly vulnerable.
And you get to a good point, which is I'm building my application, and I'm doing some static testing on the application while it's in development. And I may have a checklist of things I go through. I may do some dynamic testing, which is some simulated testing, and I get some results that have to be interpreted. Here's the challenge is, yeah, but that application is not really running in production with real user data and real user input. And how do I test for that? And a web form is a great example where the characters you could put into a web form are literally infinite. And so, SQL injection fixed here with those characters. Yeah, but guess what? An attacker's come up with these characters they're going to try a SQL injection with. Okay, yeah, but I fixed it there. Yeah, but whack-a-mole, it appeared here.
So in the experience of contrast security, can you think of some anecdotes where you either A, had a tremendous win in where you were servicing a client, and obviously the names have been withheld to protect the names of the client. We can't tell you who they are, okay? I mean, you get it, right? But can you think of some types of stories where there was an interesting discovery about, oh crap, there's this vulnerability that we found, and we're stomping on it in its tracks, and the client was like, thank you, or something of that sort?
Yeah, I think the stories like that are numerous with our customers, but definitely what we hear from our customers is by leveraging runtime application security, they're cutting down the false positives. And that's been a thing for them where they've been doing this static and dynamic testing that peels back these areas and go, oh, I found 1,000 vulnerabilities in your application.
Oh, so you're saying these vulnerabilities are being found, a percentage of those are false positives, but not real vulnerabilities.
That's right, but with runtime application security, the application is running in production with real data. And this notion of, with runtime, you're leveraging these sensors that are looking at the thing executing line by line. And so it's real data that it's uncovering. It's not just saying, oh, yikes, that line of code potentially is vulnerable. What runtime is doing is, again, because it's following the application, it'll say, not only is that a vulnerability, but based on this behavioral data that Contrast has collected, that's actually exploitable. And so now you open up the ticket and go, it's not just, hey, Tony Bailey, go fix your application. It's, hey, Tony Bailey, this is a level 1 exploitable vulnerability. So don't worry about this 1,000 over here that might be vulnerable. Focus on these top 3 or 4.
Prioritization of that list.
Yes.
Because a 1,000-item list is, well, you're just staring at it and like, what the hell do I do with this?
Where do I start?
Yeah, exactly. Where do I start? But being able to prioritize and make it actionable and say, yeah, ignore the other 900, just focus on these 10.
Yes.
That's actionable.
Yes, very much so.
Do you find yourself, of course, developers, ignoring AI for a minute, developers are only human, and humans, they never argue about anything. Sarcasm intended heavily. Do you find yourself in debate situations with developers, other parties, because you're not the only vendor in there. You're dealing with other security providers, maybe running those top 10 vulnerability lists, or perhaps compliance that they're required to do. And it's like they're bringing you in because they want another perspective or something. Do you find yourself in those, shall we say, active discussion situations? We won't call them arguments. And what do you bring to the table that's helpful to people in those situations? And
we have those conversations all the time, with whether it's an application security team specifically. It might be a SOC team as well. And oftentimes we hear this, well, we have a web application firewall, so life is good. And so
it's the magic box.
It's the magic box.
The magic box. The magic box that solves all the problems. I got the magic box, and I'm thinking of the executive nerd, who knows nothing about cybersecurity, but he's got the magic box, and he's telling everybody that he's bought the magic box. Problem solved. Let's move on to the next quarter.
And then the problem with WAFs is
web application firewall, WAF.
Signatures and known attacks. So it can block known bad URLs. It can inspect traffic and sort of make decisions based on known signatures, and it does a great job at perimeter. Going back to those reports I mentioned right at the beginning, however, so your perimeter protected, Let's talk about your application layer, which is becoming problematical. It's becoming problematical in terms of the number of data breaches as a result of broken applications. Your WAF is not going to fix a broken application or address that. It's not designed to do that. Again, it does a great job at the perimeter. So we do have those conversations. The other one we've heard as well is around, well, all my endpoints are running agents and therefore they're all protected. That's great for your endpoints, but what about your applications running in your web server? That's not necessarily going to be protected by, an endpoint agent. We're looking at application behavior within your web server and application servers.
Are these internal-facing applications or external-facing applications in the internet, or both?
It basically both. Anything. Imagine you mentioned Java. Mm-hmm. So hundreds of Java applications running in JVMs. Same for Python in a Python environment. .NET as well. And the great thing about Runtime is the use of agents to look at the execution of the application at runtime can address all those different languages and then report back, in terms of vulnerabilities. And the one thing I didn't touch upon is when something is running live in production, what if there's like a live exploit taking place? How do you detect that and block it straight away? And it's the other notion of runtime. Because it's a runtime execution and runtime application security, it's kind of designed to do that, detect the attack straight away and block it. And it gives the AppSec team some breathing room to go, oh, yikes, missed that attack, but we know what the line of code was that was problematical.
What kind of success stories come to your mind as you think of this? Obviously, names withheld to protect the individuals.
If you think about,
what types of organizations have you helped in this regard?
Yeah, I think certainly, in the financial area, highly regulated industry, making heavy use of web applications. Think about logging onto your banking, using your phone to log onto your bank, healthcare providers, retail, all of those things, again, where there may be very heavy user interaction on the on the application side, on the phone or endpoint, interacting with something that's running on a server, application server. So those are very very common use cases for us.
And so you've had success stories in those industries.
Very very much so, and I think our customers, if they could talk about it, would sort of reinforce that notion.
And this is the world that we're in. Is that and obviously, this being a podcast, we have to be mindful that it's a publicly shared thing, and only in the hallways of security conferences do we even hint at who's who in these discussions. Mm-hmm. Because that's the world we live in. Mm-hmm. That's the world we live in, and we've got to be mindful of that. And of course, the day that they do become known is usually when they're in a news story that I read on Security Friends in the morning in satirical fashion.
Yeah, and there are, the reports are out there. There's the annual Verizon data breach investigation report.
That's worth everybody reading.
Very much so.
The Verizon, every year, that is like, every security nerd should read that.
And there's another one as well. It's Mandiant, now owned by Google. They have a report as well that talks a lot about application security. And in fact, they've got a stat in there, and it's something like application vulnerabilities, number one or number two cause of data breaches. Mm-hmm. So there is a sense of urgency that these reports are sort of uncovering.
So if you were to make a guess in your world, getting back to SQL, SQL injection, how often do you find, is like more than half the time, do you find that as a vulnerability in your customers' applications?
I think
because we think that, we've got it done, we've got it resolved, and like, darn it, somebody finds a way to do it again.
Sure. I mean, if you look at some of the published lists, OWASP is a good example. You see, in other reports, you see SQL injection is listed high up there. Unsafe deserialization or insecure deserialization. We see those happen with our customers. So what you see from the reports is reflected on what we're seeing with our customers, basically.
So the same thing that's in OWASP is your experience too. Mm-hmm. That it's just that's what we see too.
Yeah, and we've talked quite a bit about applications. The other one as well to call out, applications do make use of APIs. and APIs are still software code. And APIs, they can reside in an application server. And it's another thing to think about as well is API vulnerabilities. So,
whoa, and when you think about, and this is the complexity of the world that we live in terms of application development, because you've got APIs, and APIs, I suppose, hypothetically can be nested,
yes.
and then you've got open source, and open source is a whole ecosystem that nested is not the right word to describe the enormity
Yes.
of recursiveness that exists in that world.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, it's it's beyond imagine. It's beyond the ball of yarn in terms of integration.
Yeah, and again, the way that runtime application security looks at APIs is, let's say, an application invokes an API. It's still lines of code in the API that's being executed, and as long as it's in the same environment or similar environment, runtime application security can look at that as well and uncover any vulnerabilities.
But APIs, especially if they're partner APIs, you're going way beyond your customer.
Very much so.
You may find a vulnerable API, and there's not a darn thing they can do about it.
That's right.
Because it's somebody else's API.
And talk about shadow APIs you don't even know about.
Oh, wait a minute. There are shadow APIs?
Yes.
I've not heard that expression before. What is a shadow API?
So it's an API that you don't even know is being used, essentially. And there it is in its little dark corner, operating away. Could be a third-party API that's not even residing in your system. Now, admittedly, for runtime application security, it is going to look at the APIs you do know about that are running, in an environment you can control, and you have an agent running to look at that API. So when I say API security, there are some limitations as to things that runtime application security can do on things like third-party and shadow APIs. So, but I just want to raise that because API security.
Shadow API. That's the new expression I'm taking with me from this conversation. I didn't even know there was such a thing as shadow API.
It's
I
such
thought
a
you
thing.
knew all your APIs.
It's such a thing.
It is such a thing. Tony, I've enjoyed this. I could go on for another hour about
Indeed.
this, and this
Same.
is fascinating.
Same.
This is a fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
Contrast Security,
Yes.
one of the sponsors. Thank you for being a sponsor of the Information Security
Thank you
Summit
very much.
here at the ISS 2025 conference in Cleveland, Ohio. And if you're watching this and thinking that, I can go Friday. No, I'm sorry, the conference is sold out. It sells out every year, but in future years, if this is a conference that you want to go to, here's a tip. You want to register early because it sells out. It's sold out every last 3 years in a row. Okay, so you want to remember that. Shout out to Larry Wise, volunteer for the Information Security Summit. He's on the other side of the cameras. He owns the cameras. He owns the monitors. He owns the audio gear. Yeah, He's the one that's making this podcast possible. Thank you, Larry, for your help as a volunteer for the Information Security Summit. I'm Robert Netkin at the ISS conference.